back to Miss Martha Hill. Good to have her back in the house today. Also want to give a shout out to Miss Tracy Simpson. She in here. Want to give a shout out to her anyway. The buzz around was the ladies' tea. Was awesome yesterday. For those of you that was here, I wasn't, but I've heard the buzz, and everybody says it was wonderful. You missed it. I'm sure you can catch it next year. So great job, and heard that there was great fellowship and great ministry that took place in that yesterday. You got your Bibles? Let's turn to Psalms 20. We'll talk about this morning dealing with what is in front of you. Psalms 20 says, "May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob set you securely on high. May he send you help from the sanctuary and support you from Zion. May he remember all your meal offerings and find your burnt offerings acceptable. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your counsel. We will sing for joy over your victory, and in the name of our God we will set up a banner. May the Lord fulfill all your petitions. Now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven with the saving strength of his right hand. Some boast in chariots, some in horses, but we will boast in the name of the Lord our God. They have bowed down and fallen, but we have risen and stood upright. Save, O Lord, may the King answer us in the day that we call." Dealing with what's in front of you, not always an easy thing to do. Navigating through life, it's not an easy thing to do. And we shouldn't be going through life just thinking, let me try to survive. We should be going through life thinking, what can I do to thrive in this life that God has blessed me with? I want to talk about dealing with what is in front of you. And I want the main emphasis to be, I bought a picture this week, and on the picture it says, "It is what it is." Now, granted, I'm not going to come to any hospital visit or any kind of tragedy or pain that you're experiencing in the moment, and as your pastor say, it is what it is, brother, and you just need to deal with what's in front of you right now. That's not going to show a whole lot of compassion and love. But there comes a time, no matter what it is in front of you, tragic, painful, hard, difficult, you did it, somebody did it to you, there comes a time to where you have to say that to yourself and believe it. It is what it is. I can't change it. I don't like it. I wish I could change it, but I can't. It is what it is, and now this is what I've got to deal with. And this is what I've got to deal with because I will not get God's help, comfort, healing, and strength until I begin to deal with what is right in front of me. What you're dealing with that is right in front of you may change pretty quickly. Because normally, whatever is the hottest trouble that has come your way is what you'll have to turn your attention to. Reminds me of last year being in Hawaii. Me and my son-in-law was playing golf together on one of his home courses, and we're out there playing, and I had drinking a little too much water, so I had to go to the bathroom. Well, there's not in Hawaii, there's not a whole lot of trees, so when I found the little patch, I had to take advantage of it. So I head over that way, and I'm not going to demonstrate, but I'm going to show you I was walking that way. I had to go bad. Wasn't no holding it. So I'm standing there, doing the thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm feeling something hot, stinging all over my legs. And I look down, and I'm standing right in the middle of an ant pile. Well, you know as well as I know, once you realize you're in an ant pile, your legs start jumping up, you start reaching down, and you forget. I forgot. Stephen got a good look. But you know what? After I got rid of every one of those hands, then I had 3 problems right in a row. I looked down, and now I had wet all over myself. A lot of people wouldn't rat themselves out like that, but we're talking about it is what it is. And I just looked at Stephen and I said, you done got your show for today, and you better not say anything else about this. And I'm not going to tell you what he did later in the week. But it is what it is, and you got to deal with it. Maybe it's an inconvenience. Maybe it's unfair. Maybe you look at it as somebody doing something evil against you, hard, difficult. But it is what it is. We got to realize that in this life, we are going to face trouble. We can't get away from it. We're not only going to face trouble today, we're going to face trouble. We're going to face trouble all the days of our life. Job said in Job 14:1, said that man born of woman is a few days and he is full of trouble. A few days here on this earth compared to eternity, and there's going to be a whole lot of trouble here in this world. Now, I just want to talk to you this morning about trouble and dealing with what's in front of you. And yeah, I'm going to preach, but I really want to slow down a little bit this morning, and I want to teach, and I want us to really focus in on what is in our lives at this present moment so that we can begin to deal with it, so God can begin to do some things in your life and in your family. When we look at life, we have to look at life that there's going to be a whole lot of high times, a whole lot of mountaintop experiences. There's going to be a whole lot of miracles in your life as you go through life. There's going to be a whole lot of victories. There's going to be a whole lot of times that you're just going to be utterly surrounded by the goodness of God. Even when you think God's goodness is not around you, it is around you. But as high as those highs will be, the opposite of that is that there's going to be a lot of lows in your life also. There's going to be a lot of valleys. There's going to be a lot of trouble. There's going to be tragedies in your life. Whether or not it's a tragic accident or not, there's going to be tragedies, there's going to be pain. All of us are going to lose loved ones that we're close to and that we have a bond and a relationship with. We're going to experience heartache here in this world, and we're going to experience difficulties here on this earth. And I'm here to tell you, as high as those highs will be, they'll probably in a lot of ways not make up for the lows that you will go through, just simply because we're human and we want to understand everything. But there'll be so many things that happens in the low times that we'll never be able to fully grasp, we'll never fully understand here on this side of eternity. Because God tells us in His book, Isaiah 55, that His ways are not our ways, His thoughts are not our thoughts. They're high above us. And even if He did give us explanations about things that are going on in our lives and why, it still wouldn't be good enough. I mean, let's just face it. We've got to deal with what's in front of us, and sometimes we have to deal with things that are evil, things that are not fair, people taking advantage of you. Maybe you have to deal with something that you've done yourself individually, maybe to someone else. I like the way Paul put it in 2 Corinthians, that no matter how low gets, he said in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, beginning in verse number 8, he said, we're hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. And then he says on down in verse number 16, he says, we do not lose heart, over this momentary light troubles that we're going through, because we realize that it is producing an eternal weight of glory that is far exceeds what we can even begin to imagine. It outweighs all of the heartache and all of the pain that we're going through on this earth. Let me also say this before we get to point number one. There's going to come times in your life to where you're going to experience trouble at an intensity that you've never experienced before. And when you do, it's going to put trouble into perspective for you. You're going to realize that a lot of things that have been troubling you wasn't really trouble at all when you really experience trouble. I mean, let's just face it, a lot of things in our lives are just, man, it's just a part of the daily grind. But when you really have trouble in your life, it'll put everything in perspective. And a lot of those things that used to drag you down and used to get you down won't get you down and drag you down. It's kind of like when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. Man, if we couldn't pay a bill, that didn't matter no more. If there was something around the house that needed to be fixed and I didn't have the money to, none of that mattered anymore. All those things that mattered up until that day, all of a sudden, there weren't troubles anymore. They weren't problems anymore, because this one big problem put everything else in perspective. This right here matters because I've seen what this C word does to other people. I've done funerals for what it does to other people. I know what this has done to your mom and dad at a young age. So now I know, man, this is trouble. So all this other stuff kind of just fell into perspective and really brought a new perception into life. There is trouble, nagging, difficulties that we have to deal with, and then there's trouble. So let's look. Point number one. Let's talk about the seasons of life. It's kind of like spring, summer, fall, and winter. In a lot of ways, you can look at your Christian life and your Christian walk, and it's going to be a lot like the seasons of life. You're going to go through seasons. You're not always going to be on the mountaintop. You're not always going to see the brightness and the beauty and be full of passion and energy and enthusiasm for the Lord. Man, there's going to be sometimes it's just going to go dry in your life. It's just going to go stale in your life. You're just going to feel cold. You're going to feel like all passion has left, and you're going to feel so much different than you felt 2 or 3 weeks ago. And a lot of times we really can't put our finger on exactly what it is. It's just going through the seasons of life. I wished I could stay totally on fire and passionate for God, full of enthusiasm, never get down, never go into the valley, always be optimistic, always look at the bright and positive and the beautiful. But guess what? I don't, and you don't. We go through seasons here in this life. Kind of like spring. We all love spring. It's bright. It's beautiful. Everything is blooming. There's that nice little warm breeze, and life is in the air. For the most part, we like summer, but in the summer you can experience a heat wave and a drought. But in the summer, we also can experience a lot of things that are fun and enjoyable, and we can experience growth and a harvest. There's not a whole lot of us that like fall in the spiritual life, because most of us don't like change. And in the fall, things are changing. We don't like things to change in our lives. We like things the way that they were. We want to know that this is the way this is going to be, and this is the way that's going to be. But fall, things start falling off of trees, and in the fall, there's that thing called the pruning process, to where God has to prune us. He has to cut us back. We don't like to be cut back. That's painful. We don't like to go through those changing, difficult struggles in our life. But what we don't realize that when we go through that, when spring rolls back around, after we go through the cold, hard winter, we're going to be stronger and more vibrant and more fruitful than we've ever been before. And probably not a whole lot of us in here like winter, especially in the spiritual life, because it's a hard season. It's cold. For the most part, it's dry. Let's face it, in the wintertime, everything just feels dead. It's not dead, but it looks dead and it feels dead. I know from doing a lot of hog hunting over the last several months of walking through the woods. Walking through the woods in January and February was so much different than taking a trip down in the woods now. January and February, when it was cold and everything seemed to be dead, but it wasn't dead. You could see forever through the woods, and there wasn't spider webs and there wasn't bugs everywhere. But now you can go down into that same patch of woods, and you can't see in some spots 15 or 20 or 30 feet in front of you. And not only that, there's spider webs everywhere, and there's bugs everywhere. There's ticks everywhere. It's amazing how things just change from winter as we move into spring. But we're going to experience seasons here in this life. Let me give you two principles. I'm going to get to Psalm 20 in a minute, but two principles to help us navigate through these seasons. Number one, you've heard it all your life. Accept what you can't change. Now let me break this down. I'm not saying that you agree with it. I'm not saying that you have to like it. But there comes a point in whatever it is that you're having to deal with in your life that you've got to say, even if you don't say it out loud, it is what it is. Man, the doctor says, this is what I've got to deal with it. It is what it is. You know, the relationship is where it is. It is what it is, and I just got to work from where we're at right now. I got to accept what I can't change. I can't change him. You know, it's always him. It's always his fault. I can't change him. I have to accept that I can't change him. He is the way that he is, and I've got to be the person that I am supposed to be and pray that God will change him. We have to accept what we cannot change before we can ever deal with it. That's not an easy thing to do. We don't like to accept things. We all know that that's a part of that thing we call the serenity prayer. I didn't realize it, but as I Googled that the other day, it's amazing how many people actually ask the question, where is that prayer in the Bible? It's not in the Bible, but it is a prayer and it has some good principles in it that somebody posted, but it's not in the Bible. But we do have to accept what we cannot change, what we cannot control. You cannot change your past, no matter how bad it was. No matter if you sold something you shouldn't have sold, no matter if you done something you shouldn't have done, no matter if you got married early on and divorced, no matter if you had a big party in time and you wasted a lot of years, you cannot go back and change anything in the past. You've got to accept it. It is what it is. You got to deal with it. You can't change people. There's not a person in your life that you're powerful enough in and of yourself through your words of who you are to be able to change them. You can't do it. Whatever you do, don't marry somebody thinking you can change them, because you can't. If Jesus can't change people, why do we think? And he can, but the people won't let him. If they won't let Jesus, why do we think we can? We have to accept we can't change the past. We can't change people. We have to accept a lot of times we can't change the pain and the problems and the trouble that's in our lives presently. It is what it is. I don't like it. It's an inconvenience. It's unfair. But we have to accept that we cannot change it so that we can begin to deal with it. Second of all, we have to adjust what we can change. accept what we can't change, and adjust what you can change. What can you adjust? You can adjust your attitude. You can adjust your actions, your behavior. You can address your outlook and adjust it. It's amazing how when we look at life, this is another quote that's not in the Bible, but it's a good one. Life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% of how we react to what happens to us. So it's our reaction to whatever it is that's going on in our life that makes up the majority of our life. So when we react to it, a lot of times we're reacting to something in a way we can't change it. Our reaction can't change it. It's kind of like not being able to change the direction and power of the wind. But if you're on a sailboat, you can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And by adjusting those, it can put you on the pathway that you need to be on. I mean, sometimes in life, we as people just think some people just need a good cussing. Man, if I could just give him a good cussing, he'll probably look at things and view things a little bit differently. Or we just think that complaining is going to make things better. Not only do we want to cuss somebody else, we want to complain. It's her fault. It's his fault. We want to blame. We want to get mad. And you know as well as I know that complaining and blaming only makes things worse. So we want to cuss people, then we want to complain, and then we get on this big thing. If you don't have a problem with those two, maybe we like to do a lot of worrying. Man, how am I going to fix this? You can't fix it. But we still sit there. How am I going to fix it? How am I going to deal with it? How am I going to work this out? And we get tied up in knots on the inside, worrying about it, or worse than that, pouting. Man, we'll just have this big pout to where we'll just say, it's not fair. This is not right. I mean, and we just sit around and we just pout and we just feel sorry for ourselves. Man, I'm here to tell you, that doesn't really hurt anybody but you. It hurts you. Now, why would you want to hurt you? Why would you want to bring more pain and more difficulty into your life by your own choice? Cussing somebody isn't going to do any good. Complaining isn't going to do any good. Worrying's not going to do any good. Pouting's not going to do any good. We have to adjust how we react to these things. We have to turn those things towards God and begin to deal with what is in our lives, accepting what we can't change, dealing with it right there. And as there are things in our lives that we need to adjust them. And the adjustments that you make will create an environment inside of your home, inside of your workplace, inside of wherever you are. It will create an environment totally different by just the adjustments that you make. The wind might not change. The problems might not change. The pain is still painful. But what you have adjusted has created an atmosphere that has made dealing with all of that so much easier than what it was. This one's not in your notes, but the third thing up under that point is appreciate the good in your life. No matter what trouble you're facing in your life, appreciate the good. Appreciate the great things that God is doing in your life. Number two, let's talk about the struggles of life. Psalms 20, verse number 1 says, may the Lord answer you in the day of what? In the day of trouble. Now, I know nobody else thinks this way. The day of trouble of what is happening to you at that very moment. Not what might happen to you, but what is happening at that very moment. And dealing with what is happening at that very moment. We make something this big, simply by our imagination, and we make it bigger thinking of what we could be facing, what we could be dealing with. And the majority of the time, we don't have to face that, and we don't have to deal with that, but we have tied ourselves up, we have put ourselves in bondage simply by making the problem bigger than what it really was. Now, when you're surrounded by trouble, it can consume you. It can overcome you. Maybe there's a lot of people here today that's overcome by the trouble in their life. They're consumed by it. You know what it can do? It can defile you. It can defile your spirit as a Christian. That's not good. It can depress you. It can just get you to where you just don't even want to try anymore. You don't want to try anything for God anymore. You don't want to work on any relationship in your life, and it will ultimately defeat you. I mean, it'll just make you a loser. You'll lose in every category of every area of your life. Now, this is what we need to do as a Christian. As a Christian, as a child of God, when trouble comes my way, when trouble comes your way, don't just focus on the trouble that is around you at the present moment, but focus on what God is doing in you. Now, the trouble around you is real, but what is more real for you as a Christian is what is God doing in you with the trouble that is around you. Now, let me shake some of your theology this morning. Every single thing that has happened in your life and that is happening in your life is preparing you for a moment yet to come. Now, that right there makes viewing life a whole lot easier, because I can say that everything that I am going through has been filtered through the hand of God, and God is using all of this trouble to do something in me, preparing me for a day that is yet to come. And each day we need to realize, hey, this is that day. I need to take all of this knowledge and experience that I have up to this point, and I need to use it to minister and encourage somebody else. Everything that happens in our lives, whether we can ever wrap ourselves around it or not, whether we can ever grasp it or not, is for a purpose and for a reason. Now, let me also shake your theology by this. There's never a day that I wake up that God says, let me just mess all over Jeff today. Man, this is just a good day to mess all over Jeff. Now, he did that day in a way, but God doesn't do that. And we can be assured of that. You know why? Because the Bible says all through it that God is a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. He's not a God that says, let me just mess all over Jeff to mess all over Jeff. No, everything that's happening in Jeff's life is designed for a purpose. All of the trouble that is around me in my life is designed, there's trouble, and there's a lot of trouble I don't like, a lot of trouble I wish I could have shuffled to the side, but the trouble is designed for God to do something inside of me to prepare me for the advancement of His kingdom that I'm going to play a part in, to be able to do something, to be equipped to do something that I would not have been equipped to do if I did not go through the trouble and the valley and the difficulty. This is in your notes. Visible trouble coming against you is designed for a victorious transformation in you. How many times have we been guilty? We just see the trouble. Trouble. we never see what God is doing or trying to do in us. We never see the victorious transformation. We never see that God is doing this to make you stronger, to make you better, to make you a more prepared soldier, a stronger soldier, to make you more like Him. And your trouble is not just what you see with the visible physical eye. Always remember this. What we see with the visible physical eye is the effects of the trouble. The real trouble, the root of the trouble, the majority of the time, is what we cannot see with the visible physical eye. It is what is happening in the invisible that can only be seen with the spiritual eye. Because there's a warfare that's going on. A spiritual warfare going on. With the angels of God and the darkness and the demons of hell are waging war. You and I as Christians are a part of that. Flesh and blood, all those problems that you see that show up in flesh and blood is not your problem. Your problem, the root cause of it is something you can't see with a visible eye. It is a battle that is being waged against you that you'll never be able to deal with. You'll never be able to wrap your hands around it and work through it efficiently until you realize that the majority of your problem is what you can't see with the physical eye. That's happening in the invisible spiritual realm that is being waged against you. That is the reason why our connection with God is so very important. I'm going to talk about this in point number 3. Let's talk about the strength for life right now. The strength for life now. The struggle that you're going through right now. Not the struggle. It's not the lump that they found that could be cancerous. It's just a lump right now. I've seen some people, and really it's like since I've went through this, and I try to encourage people because I read a lot of stuff and about cancer and about the stats and all that. But I've seen a lot of people since me and my wife have went through what she's went through that, man, they just have to go back for another mammogram, and they've already got it. They've already had the surgery. It didn't work. It spread to the lungs. It took their life. I mean, it's just amazing what we can allow this mind to do and where we can allow it to carry us to. The strength for life right now. 1 Peter 5:7, I use it at every funeral I've ever preached. It's cast all your cares upon Jesus, for He cares for you. You see, when you're going through trouble, a lot of times you think nobody cares. Until there is somebody who does care. And it's your Father. It's Jesus. It's your Savior. Now, in Psalms 20 right here, I'm going to go right through this real quick. In Psalms 20 right here, this is a prayer to Jehovah. And if you'll go through these verses this afternoon or next week and you'll meditate on them, you'll be amazed at how many times they're talking about Jehovah. They're talking about God, talking about His name, boasting in His name, boasting about what He can do. You see, when you're experiencing trouble in your life, your focus needs to be on the greatness of your God. Because the greatness of your God is that there is no trouble that you are facing that He can't handle, that He can't deal with, that would present any kind of impossibility for Him to minister to you, comfort you, care for you, protect you, give you the answers and the wisdom that you need to put you in the right pathway. Now, what's so great about this prayer is this prayer was prayed by the congregation as they were interceding for their king, David. David was going into battle. He was a king. He was a man of war. So he was going into battle. The congregation was praying to Jehovah on David's behalf. So they're lifting it up. That's why it says all through this psalm, may the Lord do this for you. May the Lord. They're praying for him. So that right there tells us that we should pray for one another. We should have somebody in our life that we can let know what's going on in our life so that we can know somebody out there is interceding on my behalf and praying for me. Now, notice in this prayer to Jehovah, 4 things. First of all, in this prayer, we learn that you need to present yourself daily. Now, this is going to be a key in the power of your prayer life, is you presenting yourself daily to God. By presenting yourself daily to God, there is a time every day in your life to where you are giving yourself back to God. You say, well, how many times do I have to give myself back to God? You're saved, but you got to continually give yourself over to God. Every day is a new day. God, this day is your day. You start that day out with your reflection and meditation on Him, your prayer to Him, you seek Him, you present yourself daily to Him. Notice in this prayer, this is key. Notice the congregation praying for their king. Notice in verse number 3, may He remember. Remember what? All your meal offerings, all your burnt offerings, all your sacrifices. May the Lord remember. David, as you go out there, and you're going to face all this trouble, and you're going to face all this adversity, we are praying to Jehovah, and one of the things that we are praying is that Jehovah God will remember your faithfulness to Him. That Jehovah God will remember your acts of kindness, your acts of service, your acts of faithfulness. You were faithful when everybody was looking. You were faithful when nobody was looking. We are praying to Jehovah God that He remembers the life that you live each and every day. Now that's powerful. That's powerful. That will actually give you more boldness as a child of God, as you come before Him, as His servant, as His child, eager to do and eager to build His kingdom. It will give you the boldness to be able to say, God, these are the things in my life. I've been faithful over these things. I've served you. I've been surrendered to you. And now, God, this trouble that I'm facing in my life, this is why I'm asking you to do what I'm asking you to do, is because, God, you know that I am your servant. You know that I'm going to honor your name. You know that I'm going to give you the glory. You know that if you bless me, that I'm going to bless your great name and I'm going to testify for your great name. This is so key, and it's missing in so many Christians' lives. Because we have nothing to be able to build our basis on other than, yeah, we know God is great, but what about your life? What about where you're at? What about your faithfulness? What about your consistency and your persistence? Romans 12:1, and notice what the people said. It says, may He remember your meal offerings, your burnt offerings, and find them what? Acceptable. Man, I just happened to recall a verse in Romans 12 where it says we are to present ourselves a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is what? Our reasonable service. Not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, so that we will what? Know what the good and acceptable and perfect will of God is. Find and remember, let it be acceptable. What is acceptable? Living a life, a holy life, a surrendered life. That is acceptable to God. Not that you're perfect, but when you're imperfect, you immediately see it and confess it and get it right with God. Present yourself daily. Second of all, pray your way through it. Pray your way through it. Jehovah God is the focus of the prayer. Notice he says, may the Lord, Jehovah, answer you. May the name of the God of Jacob. Man, we've heard that. The God of Jacob. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that great God, guess what? He's your God. May Jehovah remember. May He find your burnt offerings. May He, Jehovah, grant you. We will sing for joy over your victory. And in the name of God, we will set up a banner. It's all about Jehovah. When you pray, you are praying to somebody that there is nothing in this world that you can even come up with that would even come close that you can compare Him to. Man, you are praying to a God who can do what you can't even think in your mind He can do. That's how great He is. That's how awesome He is. You are praying. Notice what they're praying for. They're praying for answers. They're praying for protection. They're praying, God, defend him. God, fight for him. God, support him. God, lift him up on high. Man, God can do all of those things. God, help me with my anger. Help me with my words. I know that you say my words have life and death in them. Help me to show acts of kindness and to be more gracious and compassionate to others. God, help me be those things to others. Do you not think He's powerful enough to be able to help you, to be able to have those things in your life? So that you can be a soldier for Him. You ever said a soldier for Him is filled with acts of kindness and love and service and sacrifice. That's what a soldier is. That's what a soldier does. To engage in spiritual warfare is not with your fists. The weapons of this warfare are not fought fleshly. This battle is fought spiritually. That's the reason why the attitude and the focus is so important. Now notice as they pray through this prayer, we all know, we've heard this verse quoted, some boast in chariots, some in horses, but we will boast in what? The name of the Lord our God. Man, some people boast in their ability. Some people boast in their creativity. Some people boast in their cash or their assets or their credit or their knowledge. But no, we don't boast in any of that stuff right there, because we know that none of that stuff right there can move mountains. None of that stuff right there can lift me out of the valley. All it can do is maybe provide just a little temporary pleasure to make me feel a little bit better momentarily. But it is God that we boast in. For He can lift me out of the valley. He can put me on the mountain. He can defend me. He can surround me with His angels. He can protect me and provide for me. That's why we boast in His great name. That is a reason why when we sing of that love, as we sung about just a minute ago, when it is right here in your heart and in your life, that love that you're singing about brings a little bit different impact into your life, because you're experiencing that. You're appreciative of that, and you praise Him for that. Point C, praise your way through it. Man, not only pray your way through it, but praise your way through it. Man, you remember Paul and Silas, beaten for telling other people about Jesus. Man, we just scared we're going to have somebody ask us a question we don't know how to answer. Man, these people were beaten, thrown in prison for their faith, put in chains, facing death. What were they doing inside of that dungeon? They were praying to God, and at the same time as they were praying, they were praising God. They weren't cussing the soldiers. They weren't complaining. They wasn't worrying about whether or not they were going to have their lives taken from them. They were praying and praising God through the adversity that they were facing in their life. They were boasting in their great God. And that great God was powerful enough to send an earthquake to be able to loosen them free. Paul and Silas, being the Christians that they were, didn't run, didn't flee. Used that opportunity to be able to lead a Philippian jailer to the Lord, and his whole household winded up being saved. Notice this congregation. Last couple of things here. Notice they say there, we will sing for joy over your victory. Over what victory? They're praying for victory. They're praying. Man, here they are already saying, we're going to sing for joy. We're going to shout for joy over your victory that you have not experienced yet. But we're going to go ahead and praise Him for it. For we know that it's coming. So we're going to go ahead and acknowledge just how great He is. And go ahead and worship Him for it in advance. And then notice it says, and in the name of our God, we will set up banners. Man, we think, man, banners, what does a banner mean? That's what Jehovah Nissi means. Jehovah Nissi means the Lord our banner. He is the one that gives us victory. We're going to hold up your name. We're going to boast about that name. And we're going to let everybody around here know that it was that great name that brought us the victory. Last of all, push your way through it. I've been pastor here at Lighthouse Church a little over, started our 14th year right here at this church, not counting anything before that. But I have seen more people quit, give up. See, the funny thing about it is, out of all the people that have come through the doors of this church since we opened in this facility 12 years ago when we put this building and started using it, very few people came from other churches to begin with, a small percentage, which is good. We reached a lot of people that was unchurched. But then just a very small percentage of the people that quit and that don't come back to this church, don't go to another church. I mean, it's not like they leave here to go join another church because I didn't like Pastor Jeff's leadership or whatever. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I'm just talking about it's in a small, minute percentage-wise. When people quit, they quit. And the majority of the time when people quit, you know what they quit over? They don't quit over necessarily anybody inside the church, any of their brothers and sisters. They quit on God. They quit on Jehovah. Because there's trouble in their life and they don't understand it and they think it's not fair and they don't ever deal with what's in front of them. They don't ever say it is what it is and I got to dig in there and I got to seek my God and I got to lean on Him and trust Him. And what happens is when we don't deal with what's in front of us, it will deal with us. And when it deals with us, it will drive us away from God. Right now, I don't know who you are, but you could be at that breaking point right now to where you just got to buckle down and say, I got to push my way through it. I got to be faithful. I got to latch on to God and not let go. I'm not feeling it right now. I'm not experiencing it right now, but I'm not going to quit and I'm not going to give up. I'm going to trust Jehovah every step.